Thank you, Krishnama. Thanks a lot for the deep insight that you've given us regarding the current scenario in RERA, and you've really addressed the issue with a lot of in-depth knowledge, which we always never would go into. So I think while we've got a overview about the whole situation, there are a lot of questions that we've got. Some which we've got on the chat, and some which have been WhatsApp to me personally.
Yes.
So I would just like to address a few worries of all our fellow developers who have obviously who attended this and are extremely uh, kind of everybody wants to know about the current situation and wants to take a guided call. So one call regarding first I will one of the questions is insurance claims.
Sorry?
There are insurance claims. There are times when we are insured for losses because of natural calamity. So like you said that this has been qualified as a natural calamity, can we seek claims under the insurance because of force majeure?
Which comes under the contract. If your contract allows you that, it will come under the contract.
So do you think it's an enforceable act? I mean, we have to look at every act on its own. We have to look at every
contract. If the contract says that natural calamity is covered, it will be covered.
So then in that, do you think we can get loss of whatever is the compensation that we are paying to the workmen and all will be covered in that?
Depends on your insurance contract. I mean, that depends on what the terms of your contract are. But the question is that if it is a natural, because quite a lot of would excluded insurance claims, if it is covered as a part of the product which gives a natural calamity would be covered in that, you should be able to get that.
You should. Yeah, but one of the updates that I'm getting is the insurance company saying they will not cover pandemic as force majeure.
Then you can, so that's the whole argument, is how your force majeure is defined under your insurance contract.
Yeah.
If you look at that, what I said about the contract, and I went back to say most of the force majeures contracts do not have pandemic as a part of the, and probably as we go now, all the lawyers will start putting pandemic into the definition of force majeure now. Okay. But
event,
yeah, having said that, it is in what we need to look at is the language of the contract and apply the principles of ejusdem generis. If it has some act of God, floods and such other like, which is beyond the control, which cannot be and not be foreseeable, that is one argument. The second argument, which is I said is persuasive in nature, is the fact that the central government itself is calling it a natural calamity.
Yeah.
Okay. And I would believe that this would be effectively, if it goes to a court, and if the force majeure clause is very, very restricted, it's not wide, then you might struggle a bit. But most of the clauses would have or such other, which prevents those. We chose a language which actually may be helpful, but I won't be able to comment on a specific unless I see that. But I am hopeful that some of the force majeure clauses that I have been seeing, we would have a reasonable argument before the court to say, yes, this covers, even though the word pandemic is not specifically included. There's an argument.
Yeah, there's one more question that we received under WB HERA. While you just pointed out that we can get an extension up to a year, that we have to. So is it that every project will have to do it, or do you think that we can get an overall circular from them, and that is binding for all the projects in this?
So this I will actually have to pass this on to Nidhi, a partner in Calcutta.
And there's one more question regarding HERA.
Yes.
We are facing we are going to face a situation where we're going to get very poor collection from a lot of our buyers for projects which are under construction. So now what is going to happen is that while we will not get our payments on due date, it is also going to stop or slow down the work. So while it may be a violation contract for one buyer, maybe a reasonable part of the buyers, but it is going to slow down the whole project as a whole. So how would we address the situation out here?
So the second question, I will come back to it. The first question was?
The first question is whether everybody goes for a separate certification, or do you think one circular from them is good enough?
So I can answer. So I am saying that if the government is coming, like Maharashtra, they've come up with a circular.
Yeah.
So I think one circular today, as the way the law stands, is you've got to go and make an application under Section 6. Okay. But hopeful that if there is a reasonable representation made to the Chief Minister and to the government, I am sure it's just a matter of time. They should become, they should be coming up with it. A circular which extends it. I think should be. we'll have to see, the question is, we'll have to see whether the government has a right under HERA to legally come up with a notification or not, and whether it can be a sweeping notification which gives the right to effectively, whether it would tantamount to amending the act, or whether the government has inherently a right. Those issues which need to be seen, that whether the government has inherently the right to as far as the second part is concerned, more than HERA, I think it's more, you have, let's say, 100 home buyers or 1,000 home buyers. 300 of them are defaulting, which is putting a huge issue on your cash flow.
Yes.
To my mind, this may not be an excuse, because onerousness or financial inability to pay is not an excuse for HERA, because it's not a force majeure. They are not paying. They are not paying because they are not paying, because there is no legal right they have not to pay. Just because there's a pandemic the contract doesn't say if there's a pandemic, stop paying. If there's an act of war, stop paying. So to my mind, it may be difficult to, come under shell, take this as an excuse and say, listen, 30% of my people are not paying. What should I do? This won't come either in force your contract, I'm sure, but also in doctrine of frustration.
Okay. So I think now there are two larger issues that everybody is kind of very keen to hear an answer to it, which a part of it has been addressed by you in your presentation. One is liability to pay this, regarding the liability to pay this salary. Is it mandatory or moral? Are we, is it mandatory
to pay the salary is mandatory.
It's mandatory to pay the salary right now.
So if I say the first one,
yeah,
the first 20th notification was an advisory.
Okay.
The 29th notification was pursuant to Section 10(2) of the Disaster Management Act, which says do not reduce and pay.
Do not reduce and pay. And we cannot adjust any leaves against this time also.
Yeah, if you can go and just quickly go and see the language which is there.
Yeah.
I'll just share. So just one second. It says that directing the employees to make payment of wages of their workers at their workplaces on the due date without any deduction for the period their establishment or closure during the lockdown. So the deduction is during the lockdown.
Okay.
So I think you will be able to.
I think it's pretty well addressed out there.
Yeah, so it's the deduction during this. So if there are any adjustments to be made depending on your contract, it can't be. So what it merely says that just because they are not coming to work during the lockdown, don't cancel for them, pay for them. Legally, which is if you are otherwise supposed to be any deductions. Other
There's
than
one more. Sure. There's one more.
Yes, please.
There's one more question which has come up, which I think is pretty pertinent, is that when should you inform your clients about the force majeure? And do you need to inform all of them individually, or do you just go and inform the authority?
Under HERA.
Under HERA.
That I would probably have to toss this question to Nidhi or Orko, that when is, that's more a regulatory. Nidhi, are you there?
Yeah.
Orko? Yeah.
So HERA doesn't have any mandatory notice period or mechanism which is built into the agreement for sale. So if you see the modern agreement for sale, which is attached to the rules, that doesn't have any particular period for notification. However, for a notification, the notification has to be sent to individual allottees because it is an individual contract with each allottee, the agreement for sale, and it may not be sufficient to just sort of send it to the authority. This is with respect to allottees only. With respect to any communications with the authority, of course, you can send it to the authority.
And ma'am, in that case, do we need to send it during the force majeure, or we can send it once the situation is far more normal and the offices are working?
You cannot send it during the force majeure. I think it would be impossible to send also, right?
Okay. So
I don't know. But is there a legal obligation, Nidhi, that they have to send it now, or
No, so they don't have, there is no, in the model
to
agreement.
the buyers,
is
to the home
silent.
buyers? For the extension to the home buyers, do they need to send the notice that they are making an application, and do they need to send it now?
So that would depend on whether their application gets accepted, and when they get the extension, and then probably that notification will go out to the allottees saying that we have got this extension for force majeure.
So there is no obligation for me to inform them that I am making an application under Section 6.
No, Krishna, there's a technical question here.
Yes.
At the commencement of the force majeure event, are we supposed to intimate our buyers that this is the commencement of the force majeure and we are giving you a notice, but the period we cannot at this stage? Is it mandatory to tell them on the commencement of force majeure or on the completion?
That's what Nidhi is saying. No, but let me come back to you. I mean, yes, Nidhi.
Yeah.
No, so
that's my question.
So actually, a force majeure clause, the mechanism for how the force majeure is triggered and the notification, all of that is generally written in the contract. In our case, that contract would be the model agreement for sale. Now, the agreement for sale, if you see, is silent on any requirement for notifying the allottees. So, I would not think that you need to notify the allottees immediately on commencement is not something which is written in your contract. So it's a contractual mechanism.
The HERA does not specify any obligation to do so.
So
No.
if the agreement is silent, we can send it whenever.
Yes.
There is
Yes.
no mandatory requirement.
Reasonable time.
Correct.
I think the force majeure clause introduced by the circular, which was introduced by the finance ministry, had a clause that it has to be invoked within this period and cannot be invoked later on. The clause of force majeure, which was
For 19th February one?
yeah, the 19th February one. I think that has a clause that it has to be invoked now, and you cannot invoke it at a later date.
Okay, let me look at it and come back to you specifically on this.
Yeah.
But I don't know. For the question which Mr. Bilani was asking, that if your contract is silent
Yes.
and invoking is for the purpose of protection, we will come back and say that if the contract is silent, and I assume HERA does not have any statutory provision to do so, then I guess may not, but we'll come back. I'll come back.
Amit, next.
But yeah, there's one very important question, and I think most of the questions that are raised is regarding, most of the developers have actually rented out office spaces or retail spaces in form of mall or high street retail. It can be in either forms. Why I'm trying to segregate both of them is they have different usages and different modalities of access at different points of time. And then we have rent collections, and we also have maintenance charges, which is, so again, we are trying to divide both the views on both the charges. Again, like you said, that there's some may be on lease and some may be on leave-in license procedure. So I mean, we will need to just some clarity on every category and how to handle it.
Yeah. So I discuss this specific part.
Yeah. So I mean, since you're just trying to be a bit more specific.
I will repeat what I said.
Yeah.
And maybe I will go back to the slide which specifically dealt with this. So if you look at lease, so doctrine of frustration does not apply to a lease.
Okay.
Okay. So there are two things. One is lease is not an so when I say an executory contract and an executed contract, that means a contract where there are certain things which has to be done. In a lease, and for a moment, please do not think of the lease agreement. I'm talking about the relationship of a lease. Lease is a transfer of interest under Section 106 from person A being the lessor in the land to person B being the lessee. So much like a sale. So if you would have sold a shop or an apartment from person A to person B, B cannot come tomorrow and say there is force majeure, therefore I please take back your house. The lease has already happened. So that's what, those were the judgment. So those were the Supreme Court judges which you're talking about. Which is Dhruv Devchand. Dhruv Devchand judgment, which is a Supreme Court judgment. Now, if there is a contract, if there are certain obligations, so after lease is granted, so there's a case which was during the partition where one of the owners, one of the lessees had taken the plot for cultivation, and because of the partition to come back and says, please return me the balance of the money. The Supreme Court said, no, nothing doing because the lease has already happened. If it's a leave and license, okay, that's leave. I also mentioned that the next clause, that section 108E of the Transfer of Property Act says, if any material part of the property be wholly destroyed or rendered substantial and permanently unfit for the purpose for which it was let out because of fire, tempest, flood, or violence or of an army or mob or other irresistible force at the option lessee may be appointed. So this is if today he says that it has become permanently, I'm sorry, I missed, destroyed, rendered substantially or permanently unfit. Now, if the lockdown, if I had taken for a short period of time, which doesn't happen, so I actually stand corrected because I missed that permanently. So only in these, for a temporary period, you cannot say that the lease, I take it back. So if it's a lease which has happened before, this lockdown will not impact the lease. The lessee cannot say, I will not pay. Number two, in the lease agreement, there could be certain covenants, certain agreements. If this happens, that happens, this happens, that, those will remain. So if the lease agreement has certain escape clauses, certain exit clauses, they will happen. If there are certain obligations which the lessee was supposed to do, let's say non-payment obligations, but some other obligation you cannot do, you are supposed to do it and keep it clean and keep it, the area around it clean, do not put any stuff there. So those things could be at least excused. However, a leave and license agreement is a contract. There is no interest which moves from person A to person B. It's not a sale or it's not a lease. There's no interest. That cannot, that will get hit by doctrine of frustration because it's a contract to use, and your leave and license, I have entered into a contract to use only for ABCD period, and for this purpose, of course, it's subject to the contract. I have not been able to use it. There must another action which must be taken is that the person should terminate now. I am unable to use it. It will still be difficult because, as I said, doctrine of frustration would still need to be permanent, not temporary. So if the leave and license agreement has an exit or an escape clause in the contract and they can use it, the lessees or the licensees, okay. If they do not do it, they might try their luck, provided they want to terminate it and say that, but they can't come back after May 3rd, start using it, and then they can't say that, sorry, it is terminated.
Okay. And will rentals and maintenance charges be looked at separately? Or
so rentals under leave and license agreement are separate, and the maintenance charges are separate, both being contracts.
Yeah.
As I said, Abid, that they are both contracts. And if your contract, DOD 1, does the contract have a force majeure clause? Or does it have a complete, if I don't find my solution in DOD 1, I come to DOD 2, which is the doctrine of frustration clause, section 56. To my mind, it will be difficult unless and until they terminate now and say, I wanted to do it. And, one of my conditions was a continuous basis. That is a condition of a contract, was a fundamental condition. I'm not even able to do it. And therefore I terminate now. However, if they come back on June and they use it for 6 months, then they can't do it. Or 1 month or 10 days, they can't.
Okay. Just one last question is regarding contractors, as a lot of them have vacated the site. So, and once they come back, can they lay various claims like idle labor, remobilization charges, escalation charges? I mean, do you think it's meaningful under these terms?
Orko, I will ask Orko to answer to that. Though, of course, it will be subject to your contract, but yes, Orko.
So the remobilization charges or the idle wage charges are nothing which is pertaining to a labor related thing, right? It is a contractual arrangement. So if your contract does not allow that those remobilization charges or idle charges need to be paid back to them, you don't have to pay. If you're talking about the wages, that's a different thing, because that's the statutory under labor laws, under the Disaster Management Act. That's something that you are required to comply with, not remobilization charges.
Okay.
Okay.
I think, Nandu Bhaiya, would you like to take it forward?
Or Amit, you've covered all the questions?
Yes, we are through with most of the questions that we've got. So I think, and it's pretty well understood and addressed by Krishnava and his team.
Okay. That's it. So thank you, Krishnava. It was a great hearing from you and your team, Orko, Nidhi, and the rest of the team. Thank you very much for giving your time to this. And let's hope things improve for all of us. And we look forward to less litigation. So litigation is good for Argus, I know. But they love
there are enough ways, even restructuring on a genuinely, I think that CREDAI should be coming forefront to think, push the government for some.
Absolutely. No, we've written a lot of letters for a lot of benefits, but I think COVID-19 will open a lot of opportunities for you, for sure. So thank you very much once again, and I hope everybody enjoyed. So, and we'll be in touch. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.